Hi, welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman, and today I'm going to be sharing with you week number 26 of my 52-week series of Scrappy blocks. This one is another really fun one, very easy to make, and I hope that you'll all enjoy putting this one together. Basically, you're just going to need your 12.5-inch squares and some 1.5-inch strips from your stash. And here it is. I'm calling it the stash and slash block. Very simple to make. Let me show you how this is done. So I do want to encourage you, if you haven't had an opportunity yet to go out to my YouTube tutorial on speedy solutions to cut and organize your scrap stash, make sure that you do that. It will take you step by step through everything that you need to do to scrap up your stash and get it ready to make beautiful quilts. I also have corresponding books, the techniques book and the patterns book of my speedy solutions, and I'll have links below for all of that. But in there you'll learn that I do like to make sure that I have 12.5-inch squares that I scrap up whenever I do scrap up my stash. I like to have 12.5-inch squares because that way I'm ready for applique quilts. The 12.5-inch block is a very 12-inch size block is a very popular block, and of course you need to have the 12.5-inch unfinished so that you have your seam allowances. And I love to use those for Dresden quilts, for just all kinds of different applique quilts. Many of my mystery quilts also use that size if I'm doing an applique quilt, and many of you have already participated in some of my mystery quilt classes. And in fact, the one behind me, the very center quilt or block on that grandmother's favorite flower garden, that one was a 12.5-inch light square that we all pulled for that quilt, and then I taught the applique technique there. So definitely make sure that you scrap up your stash and include 12.5-inch squares in the lights, mediums, and darks. You'll be happy that you did so. Now let me get to this block and show you how it's all been put together. So I'm calling this stash and slash because basically you're just pulling from your stash and you're going to slash up this square and sew it back together. So simple. So what I'm pulling for this is a 12.5-inch background, and I went with dark. You could go light, you could go medium, it doesn't matter. Just use either a contrast or complementary strips, and I went to my 1.5-inch strip bin and I pulled this pale green. So that's what I'm using for this, and I'm simply going to slash up my square. The first thing I'm going to do is slash from the top to the bottom on the left and insert that the strip right here, and then I'm going to slash from the top to the bottom on the right, and again insert that strip right there, and make sure when you cut these that you cut extras, and I'll demo this here in just a minute. Once you're finished slashing it this way, then you're going to turn your block one time around here, and then you're going to slash and stash on this side as well. You've seen this done before. I'm sure that you've seen this. It's all over the internet. It's really fun, very easy to do. It makes every single block actually ends up to be just a little bit different, and that's what I love about it. So you could use dark backgrounds along with light backgrounds, along with medium backgrounds. Just make it very scrappy. Make up a beautiful quilt using a lot of your stash in this method, in this technique. So now let's see how I actually went ahead and did this. I do want to clarify, when I said I cut on my left and then I cut on my right, it's actually just vice versa for you as you're looking at that, so I apologize. So this would actually be your right and your left. But what I'm going to do first of all is do my first slash, and it doesn't really matter where you do it. You just don't want them to intersect. So make sure that this slash on this side stays on this side of the square, and the slash that you're going to create on this side stays on this side of the square. So I'm at just about a 2 here and a little over a 4 there, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut. So there, I've got it. I have slashed it, and now I'm going to stash this 1.5-inch strip in there. I'm first of all going to sew it on this side, and I'll get that sewn, and I'll be right back to the tabletop, and I'll show you how we're going to continue with this technique. All right, so I have slashed it right there, and then I've stashed it with this strip. I've sewn that in there, and for this technique I do like to take it to the ironing board, and I pressed it toward the dark And I do that each time. It just helps me as I'm putting this back together. Now, what I want to do, I need to sew this side, the opposite side of that strip, to this side of the square itself. And I want to make sure that I line that up as carefully as possible. So I've laid it on my mat where the lines are kind of matching here, and then I'm going to simply flip it over and stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and take this to my sewing machine. It looks kind of cattywampus here, but that should line up quite well. We are at the very end of this, we're going to be trimming away all four sides. So even if things aren't completely exact on the outer edges, no worries, because that will be trimmed away. So now I'm going to go do a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and I will be back to the tabletop. So I have sewn a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I've got that strip, that 1.5 inch strip, sewn in where I had slashed that on a diagonal line. So that side is ready. Now I'm going to slash the right side, or for you all it's the left side, but for me it's the right. So I'm simply going to choose a spot here and slash it. Just be sure that you're not intersecting this line when you're doing your slashing. They have to remain not touching as you're slashing them. And so now I'm ready to insert another 1.5 inch strip. And another thing you could do, I'm using the same strips for this, but you could make this really scrappy and make every strip a different color, and that would really help to use up your stash. So that's something else you can do. So what I'm going to do here is line that up, right sides together. Make sure you allow yourself a good 1.5 to 2 inches excess on the top and the bottom, so that as you're flipping it back, that you've got enough room there that nothing is going to, that it won't be too narrow for that. So I'm going to go ahead and do a 1/4 inch seam allowance there, and I'll bring this right back to the tabletop. All right, so I've sewn this strip in on that side, and now I'm lining it up. I'm kind of just lining up this part of the square with the lines on my mat, and doing the same with this side. And then I'm going to flip it over, and that should align it fairly evenly. And so I'm going to go ahead and I can take a pin. Let me grab one from back here. Take a pin and just pin it in the center, and then I can take it to my machine. I'm going to sew another 1/4 inch right there, and I will be back to the tabletop in just a moment. So here is my block. It's got the 2 strips that have been slashed and inserted on this side of the block. Now what I'm going to do is turn the block just one time like that. And now I'm going to make 2 diagonal cuts. Again, they won't intersect, but they're just going to go across the block just like this. And I will insert 2 more of my stashes. So let's go ahead. And again, I kind of go to the 4 inch mark, 4.25 inch mark, and about the 2 inch mark. And that's what I've been doing. You can certainly make yours so that it's not quite so even. That way every block would be completely different. All right, so there we have that done on this one side. Now we are going to insert another stash, or strip, the 1.5 inch strip. Again, flip it right sides together. Take it to your machine, sew a 1/4 inch. I'll be back in just a minute. This strip has been inserted, and now I need to make sure that this side is sewn to this side of the block. An easy way to match things up is flip it over on the back side, and then I am simply going to make a crease in the center of both of these. And since you can't see my crease line as well, I have used this chalk here to mark that crease. And so when I take this to my machine and line it up, I will line up those creases there, pin it, and then sew the seam allowance. It's going to look rather funny because these are on diagonals here, and you can see how these don't match up on the back side, but they will once the seam line has been stitched and it's flipped open. So let me go stitch this, and I will be right back to the tabletop. So I have finished this side. It's been slashed and stashed with that 1.5 inch strip, and now I'm going to come to the other side. It's my right side, your left side, And I'm going to go ahead and cut a diagonal line. And I am going to then insert this stash, the 1.5-inch strip, in there as well. I'll start by sewing it on this side, and then I'll attach it also to this side. Let me do that, and I will be right back to the tabletop. We're going to repeat the same process on this side as we did over here. I want to find the center of this section and the center of this section so that I can pin those and make sure that they go together as evenly as possible. In order to do that, I am going to simply bring this up to the top there and press a line there, and do the very same thing over here and press a line in that side, and then I'm going to pin those two creases together. So I'll flip it over, pin those two creases together, and then I'll take it to the sewing machine, sew my 1/4-inch seam allowance, and press it open, and I'll be right back. So you'll see here my block is finished. I just need to get it squared up. For the purposes of our 52-week series of Scrappy blocks, I am having them all finished at 12.5 inches so that when they're in the quilt, finished in the quilt, they'll be 12 inches. So what I want to do with this block is square it up to 12.5 inches. And I have a 12.5-inch ruler here, and I'm simply going to go ahead and square this up. And it really doesn't matter exactly where you place it on there. Try and make sure that you've got your outer edges as closely as possible to the lengthwise and crosswise length of the threads. And I'm just going to go ahead and start cutting this away. And I don't have my rotating mat here, so I'm going to have to flip this. It's really best if you use your rotating mat. It certainly makes this job easier. You could make these squares any size you want, really. I'm just making them 12.5 inches for this 52-week series so that all of these blocks can work in your sampler quilt. But you can certainly make these maybe using a 10-inch block, and then it might finish up by the time you add in your 1.5-inch strips and bring it back down. You might still have a 10-inch block. I haven't actually tried that out, but you could certainly test that and have fun with it and see what you come up with. But there is my finished block. I love it. They're so simple, so fun. Great way to use up your stash and just make some fun scrappy blocks. And again, if you have lots of 1.5-inch strips, which I did, you could make every single one of these a different color or a different value in your blocks. You don't have to just make them a 2-color block. Have fun with them. Just be creative and enjoy scrapping up your stash. I just want to thank you so much for stopping by my channel and watching my video tutorials. I love being able to share everything Scrappy with you. I love to share with you how you can scrap up your stash and make some beautiful quilts. I hope that you will post pictures of your blocks and your quilts out on my Facebook page. And it's so inspirational when you can share that with other quilters. That Facebook page is linked below, but it's my Quilting with Lori, and then it's my group page called Scrap Up Your Stash. So find that out there, and please be sure to post pictures of anything that you're working on. You might be working on other quilts as well, but I sure would love to see them. Make sure you share them. And if you like the content that I'm providing, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share the information with your friends and your quilt guild. Have a wonderful week and happy quilting.